Welcome to our webinar, and thank you all so much for being here today. And today we're going to focus on how your organization can create a semantic mindset and why you might want to. I'm Bram Wessel, co-founder of Factor.
I'm Gary Carlson, the other co-founder of Factor. Excuse me. And we have here this video of a 1.9 second pit stop, which was a world record at the time. But this pit stop actually took much longer than 1.9 seconds. In fact, it took years and a huge commitment of resources, plus the 1.9 seconds. In order to get to the point where they could stop a car in just the right position, stabilize the car, jack up the car, remove the tires, put the tires back on, lower the car, do this all safely. It took the coordination of about 20 or so people and a huge amount of resources and training to make that happen. So for a Formula One pit crew, it takes multiple people, multiple roles, optimized tools and technology, and lots of practice. This level of proficiency can only happen when there's a clear strategy and alignment of goals up and down the organization. This is embedded in the organization. An F1 team is about much more than the driver in the car or the engine in the car. There are many essential tools, people, workflows, but none of them are sufficient. Coordination and funding is required across the organization. Did I mention funding and executive commitment? All of those things are essential. Stitching this all together requires a mindset of excellence towards a clear goal across the organization. All of this means the organization needs to be hyper-focused on the processes, technology, and tools. And that this focus means that the groups need to coordinate. Even if each group, as it's doing its own particular thing, needs to coordinate with the other groups. It requires specialized skills and roles. And again, ongoing organizational support for each role and process. The world record is not set by any one group, but rather the entire organization, even if the work is the mandate of one group.
On the racetrack, every hundredth of a second counts. So a pit crew must break down the work of a few people into small, tightly choreographed components, so a fully staffed crew can do it orders of magnitude faster than just one or two people. And something that's less visible is that the pit area has to be designed so that the driver can put the car in a specific physical spot. So in effect, when the driver comes into the pit area, they become a de facto member of the pit crew with a role to play, just like the crew members working outside the car. In other words, pit crew staffing is right-sized to the goals of the racing team. The pit crew is architected to fit into the objectives of the racing team and performs in a regime of continuous improvement on a short and long-term basis.
Yeah. And notice that the pit crew did not need to optimize moving one impact wrench from tire to tire. As an organization, they optimized this by having 4 impact wrenches and 4 teams of people, 1 for each tire. They had the right tools and the right number of tools. This gets back to what Bram was mentioning about right sizing.
Technology must be aligned with the pit crew's mission to shave hundredths of a second off pit stop time. This means, for example, that the design of the car and the equipment to rapidly service the car, those must be designed with the same set of principles to fit the conditions of the production environment, which in this case is a race, pretty intense production environment. Like many technologies, this design work can only be done outside of the racing environment. In fact, years before an actual race, as Gary mentioned. So it must be rigorously tested before putting it into production. And this only works when a design team has a commitment to optimizing for production conditions that extends to long-term planning.
And the training that goes on, the training, the documentation, knowledge management, And the projects we see are too often an afterthought, but there's no way this pit crew could have been that successful without all of these things. It's not an afterthought. This training is a part of the overall process. The mechanics in the pit crew know the car inside and out, but practicing as a group, refining the process, is an essential part of success. The time and resources have been dedicated to managing their information, driving the training, and continuous improvement.
So speed, quality, and reliability, those are the pillars of a racing team's mission. And as we've demonstrated in the above examples, every facet of a pit crew's operation is designed with these pillars in mind to fit this mission. This reflects nothing less than an organizational mindset. Everyone who works on an F1 racing team has internalized the pillars of this mission. They all operate in concert with relentless focus on the mission and fluency in the mission's core principles. For example, investment decisions within many organizations are often, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, contentious and controversial. But on an F1 racing team, because of the alignment and focus on the mission, it becomes an easy decision to make significant investments in things like, let's say, a jack that costs 10,000 euros. Alignment makes decision-making much, much easier. So narrowly speaking, the reason an F1 pit crew exists is just to change tires. Its role in its parent organization, a racing team, is to optimize that process. This is a very strictly defined mission, but it must fit into the overall strategy of its parent organization, which is to win as many races as possible. And, this is a key point. A racing team's goal is not just to win a race. Its goal is to win every race it participates in, indeed, every season of races it participates in. Okay, for your organization, the stakes might not seem as high, but the goal of most businesses is not dissimilar to an F1 racing team, which is continuous improvement in the service of a measurable objective that is quantified on a time scale, often quarterly. As you can see, there's a huge difference between the historical average and the world record. There are no points awarded to a racing team for a pit stop, even if it's a world record time. But the mindset focused on operational excellence can yield huge dividends and make the difference between winning and losing seasons, which can result in tens of millions of dollars in prizes and sponsorships. It doesn't just contribute to the business model, it is the business model. These days, all business organizations, whether or not they acknowledge it, depend on their information ecosystems. To optimize them for successful outcomes, organizations must focus on semantics. Okay, so let's define this. What is semantic success? The semantics of fundamental concepts, they're not just dictionary definitions. They represent a depth of understanding, a shared sense of meaning, and fluency among the organization's constituents. Each organization has its own culture, which means it has its own language and vocabulary. In a semantically successful organization, all of its members are native speakers of this language and are fluent in this vocabulary because it is internalized. And there's a shared perspective across functions. Content writers must be aligned with the DAM team on how content production workflows are structured. The analytics team must be aligned with the marketing team on what measurement concepts are. The metadata team must be aligned with the engineering team on tool capabilities, and leadership must align all these functions and teams around a core set of concepts and principles that drive the business.
Have you ever been in a meeting that took 1.9 seconds? Unfortunately, either have I. There's nothing we can do that takes only 1.9 seconds. But remember that 1.9 second pit stop took much longer. Seamless information discovery, personalization, compliance, knowledge management, etc., takes years and is an ongoing process. The understanding and commitment to that process needs to be pervasive across the organization. Over and over, we have seen how important each of these building blocks are. And maybe if we do it right, it can take someone 1.9 seconds to find that piece of information they're looking for. Today's presentation shows how essential all these aspects are. Successful organizations know that alignment across these areas is essential, and AI only makes this more essential. One of the things we always work on is the model. We think this is central to semantic success. The model allows us to break down and see all the areas in our domain. It is based on a deep understanding. In the racetrack, in the race, you need to understand the racetrack, the race rules, the weather, and your organizational capabilities, to name a few. For the organizations we work with, it's the business goals and strategy, the external context. What are their competitors doing? What are the regulatory rules? Their user needs, and the organizational capabilities. Taxonomies, ontologies, knowledge graphs, etc., allow us to define and instantiate the important parts of our business. When designed well, they work as an engine that allows us to change course and adjust, move efficiently, respond to competitors, meet compliance and regulatory needs, report on effectiveness of our marketing campaigns, and allows employees the flexibility to offer new products and services. So what does this look like? When organizations kick off or continue to build on their semantic initiatives, the first step for them is often to create a new portal, create a new website, or buy a new piece of technology. But we believe an essential part of this is this notion of an information layer, and that this information layer is an organizational asset that sits between the technology and the experiences. The information or semantic models are the components of this information-rich capabilities. And in this, our argument here is that this information layer, your taxonomies, your metadata, is an organizational asset that does not belong to one system, but it is fundamentally essential to stitch together systems and experiences and allows your organization to speak with one voice.
So understanding that the information layer is an organizational asset that everybody is investing in, that's what we mean by a semantic mindset. Whether you're on the pit crew or in engineering, whether you're driving or a practitioner, whether you're in marketing or finance or the safety and regulatory team, which exists in both businesses and racing organizations, long-term success depends on constructing the foundations. Unfortunately, foundations do not lend themselves well to narrowly specific ROI metrics. If your organization wants a monetary ROI for foundational things like, say, semantic governance or essential tooling, chances are your org has yet to develop a true semantic mindset. And if your organization sees execution of business capabilities as an ROI consideration, then you probably have a fighting chance. So when the pit crew realized they could change tires more quickly if they had a custom-built jack or 4 and probably a spare 2 impact wrenches, it was going to cost the racing team a lot more money. But hey, what's tens of thousands of euros when you can shave off a few more hundreds of a second, right? This is because ROI is rationalized within the goal of the racing team. The foundation embodies the mindset.
Earlier, Bram mentioned that the pit crew is architected to fit into the objectives of the racing team. For organizations developing a semantic practice, the information infrastructure must meet the needs of end users. It must speak their language, align with their goals, etc. And it needs to work within the resources and capabilities of the organization. It does not make any sense to build a Formula One car and only fund a pit crew of 4 people or defer maintenance on it. Similarly, semantic models need to take into account the skills and roles available to support it and the capabilities of the organization to support and maintain the semantic models themselves. This organizational alignment and commitment means that any person at any time should be able to describe the scope, goals, and domain of their work and articulate how that work supports the overall organizational strategy. As organizations develop a semantic mindset, the line between the strategy and the work people are doing will become clearer and clearer. The roles of different business units will be aligned to support both the immediate need mandate and the organizational semantic needs. Additionally, executive support for funding, for ongoing management and maintenance will be a given. So what does this actually look like? This alignment spans the organization from head to toe and requires an organizational mindset that puts alignment, information, data front of mind for everyone in the organization. All semantic initiatives have elements of each of these layers, whether it's the top capability we're trying to meet, the different places people are going to interact with it, or the systems. But unfortunately, too many of these projects focus on the endpoints or the systems before building the foundational data layers. An organization aligned around its semantics will actively support and develop this foundational and data layer. There was a lot of talk about ROI and internal selling of these initiatives. But being able to tell a good story about the enabling role of semantics in top-line capabilities is a very effective approach. Doing so allows you to ask, what is the value of sales enablement or personalization, as opposed to what is the value of a new taxonomy? So in one project we worked on, we started on a knowledge management project. They had large enterprise needs around sharing information and connecting people with other people for their expertise and experience. The organization had a wiki, it had portals and enterprise applications that tried to facilitate this. And they had various systems that were supporting those endpoints. But in order to make this happen, they needed a true set of models that represented their needs. They needed to understand their products so the support team could speak with one voice about what the different products were. They need to make sure that marketing and regulatory and support teams all were speaking with the same voice. And all this needed to support the regulatory issues that were necessary to provide support to their customers. With them, we started to build these foundations. They needed organizational alignment. We need to understand the users. Technology needed place, and then governance and workflows were an essential part of this project. So this is what this alignment looks like. But the great news is after completing this, we're able to move on to additional capabilities. After that, they wanted to go into asset management. They needed to recognize that asset management of all their videos and images was a problem they needed to address and was bubbling up to get executive oversight. The great part is a lot of the work we needed to do this was already in place. Sure, we needed to identify the needs of some additional endpoints, like the digital properties and e-commerce sites. We needed to incorporate a couple more systems, but most of the data models that were necessary were already designed and developed. And all of these foundations that were in place already. The organization already aligned around what it meant to create these models. We understood the users. The technology was in place. And most importantly, the governance and workflow processes were in place. So any changes that needed to be made to adapt to these new requirements for asset management were already in place. There was a process to do that already.
Okay, so what we've tried to emphasize today is that developing a semantic mindset is foundational. It requires an integrated approach. Like the mission of the racing team, the semantic mindset must be embedded across all roles, units, and hierarchy. Capabilities like search, analytics, and personalization need ongoing support. None of these things are a one-and-done effort. There are no shortcuts. There's no quick fix or AI solution. Sustained commitment is essential. And we want to emphasize the foundation over the ROI. The ROI will come if you have a solid foundation. Semantics are a foundational element, not an ROI-focused initiative. Just like security systems like badge swipers, ROI should be assessed at the capability level. For example, functional search, not the semantic level. For example, adding synonyms. So there's no finish line, but most of you have already started. So now we're going to turn off the recording and open it up to Q&A so everybody is comfortable speaking freely. And we'd like to hear about where you are on the racetrack.